So that we're going to get that started. At the very end, we'll take questions and answers. So you are able to use either the chat or the Q&A to submit your question. It does make it a little easier for us if you do it in the Q&A, because then all the questions are in one spot, but we will go back and forth and monitor the chat and the Q&A. So feel free to type in your question throughout the webinar, and then when we get to the end, we will answer those questions. So let's get started. So what is lobbying? I think a lot of people already have a good general sense of what lobbying is, but let's just go over it for anyone that may be new. Basically, lobbying is influencing somebody who has to make a decision. We want to either talk to them or write a letter or an email or meet with them to tell them why we want them to do something, to vote a yes or vote no, or whatever it is you want them to do. And we do that because we want to influence them. We know that if legislators don't hear from us, that they might not have all the information that they need to make a good vote. So we do that because we have to influence the legislators. And the best way that we can lobby is by providing information and personal experiences about an issue. Because we need to tell them, factory farms, there are more than 10,000 factory farms in Iowa, and they are polluting the water that I drink. Providing some information and a personal experience. And then when do we do it? We do it all the time, but especially during the legislative session, obviously, because they're going to be debating a lot of bills and making decisions on amendments on bills. So it's important that we do as much as we can to influence their votes. So who can lobby? Really, anyone can lobby. Anyone who cares about an issue and the outcome of the vote can lobby. But a lot of the times, organizations and businesses will hire lobbyists to lobby on their behalf. The Sierra Club's lobbyist is Pam Mackey-Taylor, who you'll hear from in just a bit. But really, the best person to lobby is a constituent, because they're going to have or should have the most influence over an elected official, because come voting day, they're the ones that are going to vote them in or out of office. So knowing that, you can talk to any legislator, but you're probably going to have the biggest impact on your own legislator. So the ways that we lobby, we're going to dig into all of these, but we send emails, old-fashioned snail mail, phone, social media, letters to the editor, in person at the Capitol, in person at district. A lot of legislators will hold meetings in their hometowns just to make it a little bit more available to people so they don't have to drive to the Capitol. Zoom meetings and Zoom town halls. Here at Sierra Club, we are, because of COVID, we're not going to be doing any in-person activities through at least February 28th, 2021. So we're going to be digging into some of those other ways that we can make a big impact and continue to stay safe at the same time. But the most important thing to remember about the ways that we lobby is that the more people that do it, the bigger impact that will make. So if you call your legislator, ask your spouse or your child or your neighbor or your friend or family member to do it as well, because the more people that do it, the bigger impact that will have. So let's dig into a couple of these. We're going to start with email and snail mail. So basically, it's pretty self-explanatory. We're going to send an email directly to them and let them know what bill that we're talking about, what we want them to do, vote yes or no, or abstain, maybe that's what you're wanting them to do, and why you want them to do it. So that goes back to telling some information in your personal story. The other way that we're going to be doing a lot of email actions during the legislative session is through action alerts. So when something happens at the Capitol that might be a big deal and it's kind of last minute and we need to get as many people to call certain senator or representative or send an email, we'll issue out an action alert. It makes it really easy to quickly send a message to your legislator. There's a screenshot that says Sierra Club Iowa Chapter, Protect the Jordan Aquifer. That is an example of what an action alert is going to look like when you get that in your inbox, and Pam's going to have one to show you later on as well. But all you have to do is fill in your information, click send, and it automatically is going to send that to your legislator. So that's super easy. We know that that's really good if you don't have a lot of time and we just want to get as many as we can submitted. But know that if you send a personal direct email to your legislator, you may have, if they're getting 300 emails in one day, they may not read your email. But if you're sending a direct one, you might have a better chance of making sure that they see it and respond. And but we still want to do the action alerts because sometimes we just need quantity, and that's what's important. Snail mail, same thing as an email. We're sending a message, but instead of email or doing an action alert, you're just going to write a letter old-fashioned way or type it out on your computer and print it, and you can mail it to them. Another thing that we think would be a good idea, especially during COVID times, is doing postcards, because postcards are going to be really easy to get a clear message, and you can hand them out to your friends and have people just, quickly on the back say, we want clean water, vote yes on Senate Bill 123 or whatever the bill number is. So think of postcards. Think of other ways that you can send them stuff in the mail that might have a big impact. So let's go on to the next one. Is by phone. So this is basically the same thing as emailing or snail mail, but we're actually going to talk to them. We want to call them and say, hi, Representative Smith. My name's Jess and I'm your constituent, and I want you to vote this way. So that's going to be really important because you actually get to have a conversation. You will be able to hear, you can ask them a question and hear what they have to say. You can get an answer to, will you vote yes, right there on the call and not have to wait for an email or a letter back in the mail. So right now, while you're looking at the screen, you should see that there are phone numbers there. Save those phone numbers into your phone, jot them down however you want to do it, because that is the number that you'll call if you're trying to call your senator or your House member when they're in the chambers making a vote, and someone will answer the switchboard and ask you who you want to talk to and transfer you to them. So just save those numbers, because if you aren't able to call your representative on their cell phone or on a different phone number, that's a really good way to get a hold of them while they're at the Capitol. And if you are able to get their cell phone number, which we'll show you how to do that in a little bit, send them a text. You can just shoot them a quick text that says, hey, this is Jess. I'm your constituent and I need you to vote yes on the clean water bill. So don't be afraid to use texting. I know that's not something probably we've traditionally done with legislators, but I think that, now's the time to be creative during the pandemic. So let's use texting. They're going to see your message if you text them. So if you are going to call your legislator, I think it's important to just kind of be prepared of what you want to say, because I know that can seem a little scary to people if you haven't done it before. But let me tell you that after you do it a couple times, it'll be easy peasy and you won't have to think about it again. And this is some little tips just to make sure you have a successful conversation. So introduce yourself. Let them know that you're in their district. The minute that they know you're going to be one voting for them, they're going to be listening to you. So make sure they know that you're in their district. Have the bill number ready. And if you don't have the bill number, don't not call them. You should still call them. But if you can get the bill number, have that ready, because that'll just make it easier for your legislator to actually look up the bill that you're talking about. Come up with 3 reasons why you want them to vote a certain way. Personal stories are the best. So you can use facts and you can say, well, there's over 10,000 factory farms in Iowa, but facts can be forgotten. And we know that the other side of our issue probably has facts of their own that contradict our facts. So personal stories really are the best. Talking about how you can't put your clothes out on the line to dry because of the odor from the nearby factory farm, or talking about how you're scared for your child's future because of climate change. Tell that personal story, because they can't dispute your personal story and they won't forget it either. So keep in mind that have your 3 reasons, have at least one of those be a personal story. Next is ask them what they think about the issue. You want to try to get an idea of where they're at. So that way, if they say something, you can hold them accountable to it later. And reiterate what you want them to do at the end of the call. So after you've found out what they think, if they plan on voting yes or no, say, Representative Smith, I really appreciate your time talking to me today. And I'm so glad that you said you're going to vote yes on Senate Bill 123. So that way you're kind of reiterating what we've agreed to. And then what's really good too is jot down some notes after your call. You never know when it's going to come in handy. I've had a lot of times where I know my legislator said they were going to do something and then they voted the other way. And then you have to say, well, when I talked to you on January 5th, so keep a note, and that might come in handy someday. So hopefully that's a little helpful when you're calling. But just remember that the legislators are just like you and me, but they decided to run for office, just like you and I can. So they're everyday people. They go to the grocery store to buy their groceries. They probably walk their dog around the block. They're just like us. So don't feel intimidated by calling the legislator, because you could be the legislator next time. So next thing here is social media. So this is going to be a big one, especially right now during COVID times. Social media means Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. I'm assuming most legislators have Facebook accounts. I'm not sure if they're on some of the other platforms, but just know that you can use that to lobby. So one, you can just share a message far and wide so that you can get your friends and followers on social media to hear your message and just spread that out to more people. Or you can do it to tag your legislator and kind of put a little pressure on them. I put an example down below on my own Facebook page. I love Senator Claire Celsi. She's my old senator, and I'm friends with her, so I used it so I could show you how to tag. But you could say, the bill is coming up in a week. Senator Claire Celsi, please vote yes to protect our water. And because you tagged her, it's going to show up on her page, and other people are going to see your post, and she'll feel a little bit of pressure to do it. But we know that Senator Claire Celsi would vote yes on any clean water bill, so I'm not putting her on the spot here. So the other things you can do is join community groups. A lot of times counties are going to have like a county community group or a town community group, or your local Democrat discussion group or Republican discussion group. Just look for different groups to where you can spread your message far and wide, and you might find other people that are interested. If you're lobbying on a bill about agriculture, maybe look for some local farmer groups and spread it in there, or look for the local food co-op and see if you can put it on their Facebook page. Share the action alerts. So when we send out a message that says we need everyone to call Representative Smith, we'll also have a link to how to share that on Facebook. So it's really helpful if you can share those action alerts on your social media, so that way more people see it and more people will send a message to Representative Smith. And also, your legislator is likely going to have a Facebook page. They may even have it in a group form where they welcome discussion and good feedback. So take a look and see if your legislator has that, because that's going to be good for you to get a hold of them when it's important to do so. And lastly is that Sierra Club Iowa chapter, we have a Facebook page, and we'll be posting a lot of legislative updates. So that's a place that you can visit to see what we're doing, what bills we're monitoring. Every Friday, we're doing lunch and learns on important issues. So use our Facebook page as a resource for you. And then just tips when you're thinking about what you want to share on social media is, if your goal really is engaging young people, because we know as a movement, that's something that's really important to all of us, is know that Twitter and Instagram tend to be a little bit better for young people. If you want to give that a go, good luck. If not, Facebook is completely fine as well. Posts that have pictures do better than posts that only have text. So just keep that in mind if you're writing something out and not just sharing something. Throw in a picture or something, so that way it increases the number of people who see your post. And then, like we were talking about earlier, finding groups that may be interested, is spreading your post in different groups actually extends that message beyond even people that we may be friends with. So it could be a good way to reach someone that's not hearing our message at all. So that's my little tip on social media. The next thing is letters to the editor. This is another really important thing to get our message out beyond our normal, the echo chamber that we already have, the people that we always are talking to that hear what we have to say a lot. Letters to the editor are for anyone to read. And they're a really powerful tool to put pressure on an elected official, because they know that hundreds, thousands of people are potentially reading this, and they're being told to vote a certain way publicly. So letters to the editor are extremely important. They also let other constituents know what an elected official is doing. So if you're sending out a letter asking Representative Smith to vote yes on Senate Bill 123, your neighbor 5 blocks down may not know that this is even an issue right now. And because they read it in a paper, all of a sudden you've influenced your neighbor who also can vote for that senator to be reelected at the next time, or not vote for that senator to be reelected the next time. So using letters to the editor is a really, really important way to get our message out during the legislative session. And I know it seems a little intimidating to have to write a letter and have it published, but think about it this way. It's short and sweet. Letters to the editor are 200 words or less. So if you just sit down and write something that you're feeling flowing through your brain, the hardest part is going to be cutting it down to 200, because it's so hard to only keep something at 200 words. So you're going to end up struggling to lower your word count, not try to get to 200. And the other thing is, we always think of like the Des Moines Register or Cedar Rapids Gazette or some of the big papers for our letters to the editor. But especially right now, we need to keep in mind that local papers are really important, because that's going to be getting our message out to people who are very likely not hearing our message. And when we look in rural parts of the state especially, that's where we really need to be doing a lot of organizing, a lot of communication, and a lot of work. So don't forget about your local papers when you're submitting the letter to the editor. And I even have a little anatomy of a letter to the editor slide here to show you, to make it seem a little bit easier what you want to do. So think about it in 5 steps. You're going to do an opening, you're going to give 3 reasons, and you're going to do a closing. So my example letter to the editor is, Iowa has a water crisis and factory farms are to blame. We need Representative Jones to stand for clean water and vote yes on House File XYZ, the factory farm moratorium bill. There's my opening. That's, what is that? 2 sentences, very simple. And then my reason number 1. First, Iowa has over 10,000 factory farms that produce more than 26 billion gallons of manure every year. That's too much manure and it's ending up in our water. There's my reason 1. Reason 2. Second, the Iowa DNR does not have the resources it needs to monitor and enforce water regulations. Short and sweet. Reason 3. Finally, the factory farm model forces independent farmers to go out of business. That hurts rural economies and the future of rural Iowa. And then you close it out. So we need Representative Jones to vote yes on HF XYZ to protect our water, our farms, and our rural communities. So don't overthink it. If that helps at all, think of it in a 5-step: opening, 3 reasons, and a closing. And that one right there, 122 words. So that's a pretty short one. So the next way that we lobby. Now, we're not going to be doing a lot of this year because of COVID, but I think it's important to review because we will be back at it once it's safe to do so. So lobbying at the Capitol is when you actually go up to the Capitol and you ask your legislator to come speak with you. The pros of doing it that way is that you get one-on-one time with your elected official, and you can be present for votes and discussions. So you can actually be there when they're voting. You can hear what talking points they're using during the meetings. So that way it might help you talk about the issue better if you know what the other side is saying. You can meet with more than one legislator in a day because they're right there. So you can usually be pretty efficient in your lobbying. And another thing is, when you're up at the Capitol, if you bring a bunch of people with you and have a big lobby day, then you can have a big impact. The cons of doing it at the Capitol is that sometimes the legislators just simply won't come out and talk to you, and it is what it is. And some days are great and some days are not great. So that's a possibility. And not everyone lives near Des Moines. So that's another thing to think about, is that it's not always accessible. Just because someone might have a 4.5-hour drive, and probably not worth it to go have a 5-minute conversation with their legislator. So that's why there's this other way to do this in person, which is in district. And in district lobbying basically means you're doing it at home. So you're either going to your legislators forum, or you see them at the grocery store maybe when you're shopping. But it's basically, you're at home. So it's easier, it's closer. So that's the number one pro, is you're close to home. It makes it more accessible for people. Number two, if your legislator sees you at home, then they know that you're a constituent. So that's also really important. Three, you can educate other constituents about an issue. So if you're at a legislative forum and you take advantage of the public comment period, you, by talking about a factory farm moratorium, might educate someone else in the room that didn't know about that. So you actually have the ability to meet your neighbors and maybe influence them and find more people to advocate with you. And then the other thing that's really good about in-district meeting is if you get there early or if you stay after it's over, you might be able to talk with them one-on-one. So just keep that in mind. You never know, if you stick around, they might have some time after the meeting to talk with you. And then the cons is public forums like that are at home are usually run by the legislator, so they could pick their own agenda and they may not have a Q&A comment period or a public input period. But that's when you probably would want to just stick around after and try to catch them before they leave. So that's the in-person styles of lobbying, which we're unfortunately not going to be able to do a lot of this year, but we will be soon. So that leaves us to, because of COVID, we have to be creative. So all those things we talked about a little bit ago are pretty traditional styles of lobbying. And this gives us a really big opportunity to be creative. With Zoom, like what we're using right now with this webinar, I foresee legislators holding Zoom meetings and Zoom town halls. And we, as an organization, we can hold our own Zoom meetings and Zoom town halls, where we can give people the opportunity to talk to legislators, or you can take advantage of a meeting that somebody else organized and ask a question or hear what they're wanting to say. And we have to think of, like, maybe there's cool ways you organize on Zoom where everyone posts the same comment at the same time in the chat that says, vote yes on House File XYZ. So think of different creative ways that you can use the features of Zoom to organize. Maybe everyone raises their hand at the same time, or everyone puts a question at the same time. So think of different things like that. But we have to act collectively to amplify our voices, because we're not in person. We have to, there has to be more of us doing it to be effective, because we can't actually go up to the Capitol and make sure that they're listening to us. So try as best you can to not act alone. Like if you're going to call someone, find someone else to call them as well. Letters of the editor are going to have to be a must. A lot of people have written letters to the editor before, but if you haven't, this is the time to do so. This is the time to step up and say, you know what, I can put a few words down on a piece of paper and help the movement out. Social media. This is going to be a really interesting way to lobby this time, because of like tagging people and the ability to publicly hold someone accountable to voting away. Like this senator is going to be voting on this on Tuesday, and when I talked to them last week, they said they'd vote no. I expect them to vote no on Tuesday. So use that to kind of, you know, it's a public way to hold someone accountable. Another thing that I was talking with Pam today about, you know, what other cool things can we do to be creative about lobbying? And we thought of, you know, film a video of yourself, a short video, like 30 to 60 seconds, saying, you know, my name's Jess. I value clean water, and factory farms are polluting our water, so I want a moratorium. And put it on Facebook, and, you know, encourage people to share it. And maybe someone else can make a video, and then we'll get our message out in a big way that way. Demonstrations. So, you know, this is up to everyone depending on what they're willing to do. Is, you know, outdoor vigils or something, or holding signs in front of a busy grocery store while people are driving by, you know, saying this vote is coming up and our legislators about to pick a side. So think of different ways that you can do that with yard signs, even just by making a homemade yard sign that says Senator Smith needs to vote yes on XYZ, the factory farm bill. So think about yard signs you could put out. You know, check with your local paper and see how expensive it is to put an ad in your paper. Maybe you can, you know, come together with a few of your friends or neighbors and everyone pitch in and put out an ad that says, we call on Representative Smith to vote yes on House File XYZ. So think of different ways that you can make an impact locally. Maybe it's even just flyering your neighborhood and letting the neighbors know that your legislator is going to be taking a vote next week. Talk radio, call into your radio. And when they ask, a lot of times like IPR or local stations will have opportunities for you to call in and ask a question or to give your opinion on something, and take advantage of that. And then really it's going to be all about the relationships that we build with our legislators this session. Because we can't do a lot of stuff in person, it's going to be like right now, it's even worthwhile to call your senator and call your representative and just introduce yourself. Start to build that relationship so that they're going to listen to what you have to say throughout the session. So give them a call and just say, my name is Jess, I'm in your district. I'm a really big environmentalist, and I'm probably going to be talking to you a lot about environmental issues this session. And I hope that you'll take the opportunity to talk to me when that time comes. And just introduce yourself, be a friendly face, so that way they're going to answer your call later on throughout the session. So this is something that we're really looking into doing throughout this session, that we're going to be inviting Sierra Club members to participate with, is Zoom meetings and Zoom town halls. When there's a legislator that we want to ask to do something, if it makes sense, we want to host, a small meeting with maybe some constituents, so that we can have back and forth conversations with the legislator. And like I said, they'll probably be constituents just because it's going to be the biggest impact. In Zoom meetings, you probably won't have a ton of people on, just because it gets complicated when there's too many people talking all at once. So we'll do some small group meetings. If you know that you are interested in doing that with your legislator, get a hold of Pam or I, and we can try to prioritize that one. The other thing is Zoom town halls. It'd be kind of like this webinar style, but we could invite legislators for large group meetings where we kind of do a panel discussion. We could have people ask questions. We can use the Q&A that you have access to in Zoom to have the legislator answer the question there in front of all of our Sierra Club members. So stay tuned as we get those planned. It could be that sometimes those are going to be a little last minute, just because it's the nature of the session. A lot of things happen last minute. You don't get a ton of advance notice. So just stay tuned for your Sierra Club emails, and we'll be letting you know when we get some of those organized. And then this is what I was talking about earlier with like kind of in-district lobbying. Legislators will have town halls or forums. I think a lot of legislators are going to switch to Zoom for this session. There might still be some in person, but if your legislator is hosting a town hall on Zoom, take advantage of that. That's going to be a super beneficial way to lobby from home. Make sure you get your friends and neighbors to also attend the Zoom town hall, so that way there's a ton of people that are all going to ask the same thing, and that way your legislator can't brush off or ignore your question. So make sure that you know how to use Zoom features. So like right now, you all have Zoom, and you should all have some buttons at the bottom. Yours might not look quite the same as what you're seeing on my slide, because these are some of the host features, but you'll see that you have Q&A. So when you join your town hall that's hosted by your legislator, note, did they enable Q&A? Is there going to be a Q&A? And be ready to ask a question. Chat. Make sure that you know how to use the chat feature. You just click on the chat button and you can type in there. Know that chat, everybody in your town hall or your webinar can see your chats. If you ask a Q&A, only the host of the webinar can see your question. So just know the difference between that. Another thing that Zoom has that the person who organized it would have to enable this feature. So you may or may not see it, but Zoom also has polls. And so your legislator may say, I am going to be considering a vote on this climate change bill. And I'm curious how many of my constituents are supportive of this bill. Please answer this poll and make sure that you can click on poll and say, yes, I want you to support that bill, or no, I don't. I foresee legislators using that feature. So anytime you hop on a Zoom meeting, take a look at what features have been enabled. Do they have a Q&A? Have they allowed chat? And have they allowed polls? And just be ready to use those. And then at the very end, send a follow-up email to your legislator, especially if they didn't answer your question, or just to say, hey, thank you so much for answering my question. I look forward to seeing you vote no next week. So send an email so that way they know you were there and I was paying attention and I know what you said you were going to do. So definitely take advantage of these Zoom town halls. We'll actually do our best to compile a list of legislators that are hosting either in-person meetings or Zoom town halls like these. And we'll try to put that up on the calendar or send that out in one of our emails. But just know that in non-COVID times, most legislators hold these town halls in their hometowns or in their district somewhere, like once a week or sometimes every other week. So this is a very common thing. You just have to know when your legislator is hosting it. And that could be a great reason to call and introduce yourself to your legislators, saying, hey, my name's Jess, and I wanted to introduce myself. I'm your constituent. Are you going to be hosting town halls this session? If so, when, where, how, what's the plan? And find out. Mark them on your calendar and let us know too, so that we can tell other people in your district. So next thing is, we've been talking a lot about the Senate and the House, but don't forget about the governor. Once the bill passes both chambers, it's going to go to Kim Reynolds to either sign into law or to veto. She's also going to be doing a lot of other important things like budget recommendations. She's going to be making appointments to state agencies and commissions. And even though some of those aren't necessarily bills, those are things that we're going to weigh in on, because it's important to us who's the head of the DNR. And it's important to us who's on the Environmental Protection Commission. So those may be other opportunities to weigh in this session. And then here are her social media and contact information stuff so that you can save this in your phone. So she has a phone number at the Capitol that you can call. She's not going to answer it, but you can talk to one of her staff people. She does not have an email address. She has a website where you can submit a form. So you won't be able to actually send an email. You have to go to that website and type in your comment and hit submit. She has a Facebook page so that you can go on to her Facebook page and make a comment, or if you're making your own Facebook post, you can tag her in it. And then she also has a Twitter account. So if you're Twitter savvy, you can tweet at her or whatever you want to do on Twitter. So don't forget about Governor Kim Reynolds. And then this next thing is how to find your legislators. So you can probably just Google who's my legislator Iowa, and you'll be able to get to this website, but this is the actual website address. It's www.legis.iowa.gov/legislators/find. And all you'll have to do is you'll type in your address. So you can see the example here. We typed in the Sierra Club office address, and the senator and representatives in that district are Janet Peterson and Marty Anderson. And then you can click on either of those names. So I clicked on Marty Anderson's, and you can get some more information about her there. You can see what committees she's on, what bills she's introduced, amendments that she's introduced, her home phone number, cell phone number, her address if you wanted to send a letter. And you can find out a lot of information. Some of them have occupations on there. So just know that you can get a pretty good piece of information off of the legislative website if you aren't sure who your legislator is. So I'm going to wrap up my section before I hand it off to Pam. I'm going to give you some tips here. So one, biggest thing, make sure they know that you're a constituent. That is so important. If they don't know that you're not a constituent, or if you are a constituent, they might dismiss what you have to say because they care about the people who are voting for them the most. Second, legislators are notoriously good at changing subjects. If you're talking about something that they know that they're not going to be on the same side as you of, they're going to try to change the subject. They're going to say, oh, water. Well, did you see that new pool that's built out in Waukee or something? They're going to figure out how to change the subject. So don't let them do it, because you may only have 3 minutes of their time. And if they get you talking about something else, you never got to talk to them about what you came there for. So just politely bring it back to the issue you want to talk to them about. They're going to be completely fine if you do that. They're used to this. They're experts at trying to change the subject when they need to. Have a bill number ready if you can. That just makes it easier for your legislator to know what bill you're talking about. And just note that bills numbers do change throughout the session. So as long as you have a bill number, they'll be able to find the most recent version of the bill. But just know that if there's any confusion over what you're talking about and what they're talking about, it could just be that the bill number has changed as it's moved through the process. Like I said a minute ago, get to the point. You may only have 3 minutes of their time. Facts can be forgotten, but personal stories won't be forgotten. So go heavy on the stories and lighter on the facts. And another thing to think about, which I have on here as the last bullet point, is if you are wanting to make sure they understand some of the facts and statistics, that's something you can do with a follow-up email. And that's something you can do with a flyer that they can reference later. So you don't need to spend your valuable time that you have with them talking and educating them on some of those statistics. Just let them know that you're going to be sending an email with some of the statistics that are important for them to know after it. So don't waste your time too much on the facts. Get to those stories. Send a follow-up email to recap your conversation, provide the information you discussed, and leave a flyer. So that way when they're on the floor about ready to vote, they might see that orange flyer there and go, how was I supposed to vote on this bill? Oh yeah, I talked to Pam. She told me to vote yes. I'm gonna vote yes. So make sure you leave something with them that they can reference. Oh, I never advanced because I was just talking about them. Here you can see all the things I was just talking about. And then my last thing before I switch it over is if you are really unsure of what to say, don't make that a reason that you don't call your legislator. Call us, ask us, we'll help you. We're going to be sending out these action alerts that have talking points and instructions. You can check our blog if you are unsure of, what is the best talking point to use about a certain issue. Plan ahead. That's going to help you a little bit, not be so nervous in that moment. And before you start your conversation, just know that what you're asking them to do and the reasons that you want them to do it, and then email us and ask us and we'll help you. We don't want to send anyone in there to do something that they're nervous about. So we'll make sure that you succeed. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Pam, who is going to talk a little bit more about the legislative process and our legislative agenda.
Thank you, Jess. So there's some key dates that we need to keep in mind during the legislative session. The legislative session usually runs from January through the end of April, and things run pretty fast. So it's you're on a fast pace throughout the session, but there's some key things about it. The legislature runs on a process called funneling. And what they do is they get a large quantity of bills that they have to deal with at first. And then on March 5th, the number of bills gets reduced significantly because if they have not passed out of a committee, then they're considered more or less dead for the rest of the session. They can come up again as amendments, but those particular bills are done. There's a second funnel that gets rid of even more bills. And those are the ones that have to pass out of one chamber and have to be out of a committee in the other chamber. So by the time it's done, the number of bills have been reduced significantly, which means that we need to stay on top of what's active and what's still moving through the process. Another key date is February 12th, and that's when all the bills have to be into the legislators' hands and into the bill writers' hands. It's called the Legislative Services Agency. And so, as you can tell, there's a tight process that happens. A lot of the work in submitting new bills actually happens in the months before the session opens. And finally, April 30th is the predicted end date of the session. Sometimes it runs a day or two longer. And so there's usually a scramble toward the last few days to get everything finished so that legislators can get back home. And the other reason is that their per diem money runs out on April 30th. So there's a great incentive to be completed. As I mentioned, there are a process of getting through committees and subcommittees, and I'll go through that right now. Both the House and the Senate start out with introducing bills through the subcommittees. Almost every bill is assigned to a subcommittee of 3 legislators. Sometimes there are a few more depending on the bill. And that subcommittee can either choose to address it, or sometimes they don't even meet at all. But if they do meet, 2 of the 3 members have to pass a bill in order for it to go to the full committee. And there's a full House committee and a full Senate committee. Now, there are hearings that happen during the subcommittee, and you can participate in those hearings. What the legislature is telling us this year they want to do is do a lot more in writing. So we should know ahead of time when these subcommittee meetings are, or what the bills are coming up, and then we will encourage you to write to the legislators. And then once the bill goes out of committee, it can go to the full floor for a vote, an up or down vote. Actually, some bills get out of committee but never see the House or the Senate floor. That's just the way the process works. And bills have to pass through both chambers, and then they get signed by the governor. So there are several things that we think are going to happen this legislative session. The first thing is we're going to be playing defense a lot. As you know, the House and the Senate and the governor's office are both controlled by the Republican Party members. The issues that we normally deal with are generally more acceptable to the Democratic side of the fence and are more often advanced by the Democrats. So that makes our issues a little bit more challenging. I do believe that the bottle bill is going to come up this year. The bottle bill is sometimes called the bottle deposit law. And you all know about that because if you buy a can of pop or a bottle of beer, you pay a nickel deposit on that bill if you buy it from a store or a convenience store. And then when you consume the product, you can return that empty bottle back to the store and you get your nickel back. That process of paying a deposit and then returning your empties is popular. The majority of Republicans, Democrats, and independents support it. However, the grocers aren't happy with it. And there are individuals who would like to see that law dispensed with, and there's already been a bill pre-filed that would do that. We see this every year, but this year it looks like there's a heavy drumbeat to get rid of the bottle bill. The bill has been really successful in Iowa. About 71% of the beverage containers are recycled. And that compares with 29% nationally. So we're doing really good. It'd be nice to have that number greater than 71%, but we're doing better than if we didn't have a bottle bill. And the bottle law also provides jobs to Iowans who are involved in the recovery process, including the redemption centers. It's tricky. The redemption centers need a raise. They only get a penny to process the cans, and that needs to be increased, which we support. And then we would like to see the bottle deposit law expanded to include more containers, like water containers, juice containers, and sports drink containers. But we do expect that to hit the floor this year, and we are going to be opposing any effort to dismantle it. The next thing that we believe is going to come up is part of the budget. REAP and I will. So REAP is the program that funds a lot of our outdoor recreation, some of our water quality initiatives. Every county gets grant money to help with their county and city parks, and also museums and outdoor activities. So REAP has always been underfunded. It can be funded up to 20 million. Sometimes it gets 12 million a year. We'd like to see that fully funded. We also know that that program expires in 2 years. So we'll need to work on extending that. Another environmental legislation related to Parks and Recreation is the I-Wheel bill. That is that 3-cent sales tax that we passed about 10 years ago. It's never been implemented. The governor is interested in increasing to increase the sales tax to a penny, and it would pay for some other things. But part of that governor's plan was to reduce some of the income taxes. And another piece of her plan last year was to move existing DNR programs into the funding from I-Will. So when it was all said and done last year, there was going to be less than 1/8 of a penny of new money going to the I-Will tax. So we believe that the funding formula should be the same, that they should be new programs, and that the funding for wildlife, parks, nature preserves, all of those things should be as the voters had intended and thought they were going to be. And the budget's going to be interesting this year. It looks like there is more money in the budget this year, more revenue coming in from corporate partners, sales tax, income tax for corporations. But there's also a steady drumbeat to cut taxes, and we're concerned about some of the effects of those tax cuts. Another thing we expect to happen is a factory farm moratorium bill will be submitted. Right now, Iowa has too many factory farms and too much manure. It's affecting our water quality. In fact, most of the waters on the impaired waters list are affected by nutrients, bacteria, microcystin toxin, things like that that are actually constituents or caused by nutrients in the water. The master matrix is not a viable solution. Right now, the master matrix only involves the largest CAFOs. The process is pretty broken. The neighbors don't have any real input into the process. So we do not believe that fixing the factory farm issue involves fixing the master matrix. We believe that a moratorium is the best idea. The decision makers for factory farm applications are appointed by the governor. They're part of the Environmental Protection Commission. So those are all political decisions. And right now in Iowa, the last time they did a survey, 53% of the respondents to the survey thinks it is important for the state legislature to pass a proposal banning construction of new and expanded CAFOs. So we believe it's time for the legislature to step up and implement a moratorium. Those are the three main things we think that are going to come up. I'm sure there are going to be plenty other things. We don't usually get a heads up on a lot of these things until they get introduced. So we have to be pretty fleet on foot. And every week we look at the bills. We have a committee that's made up of volunteers that help us look at the bills. And then we register on those. As Jess had mentioned, we'll be using our blogs. We'll be sending out emails and action alerts as we go through the process. So we have something that we're doing this year for the first time, and it's called a Legislative Action Team. And you can sign up for that. If you're on the Legislative Action Team, we will be sending you emails and alerts directly when things come up. And to get to that, you go to the homepage, the Sierra Club's homepage, and it's listed here on the slide. It's www.sierraclub.org/Iowa/Iowa-legislature. And if you look right underneath the picture on the right side, the second prompt is to join that team. And we encourage you to do so. The other thing we encourage you to do is tune into our Facebook page, because on Fridays at noon, we're going to have lunch and learns. We started practicing on this in late November and in December. And every noon we pick a topic and for about half an hour, discuss that topic, what the issues are, why it's important, and things that you can do. And so we encourage you to tune in every Friday at noon on Facebook, and we'll see a live stream. So the next slide is and what an action alert looks like. And this is one that is about a moratorium on factory farming. We expect this one to be sent out here fairly soon. And again, we just ask you to take action and forward it to your friends, neighbors, family, other people who would be interested. And it's really important to get our thoughts and desires on this issue registered with the legislators. Right now, we have at least one member in every House district, which means we've got several members in each Senate district. And so if we all participate in this, we can reach every single House member and Senate member in the Iowa legislature. So we've got a lot of power. We've got an email list of about 30,000 names. So if even a small fraction of those people support us with answering action alerts, we have a lot of power within the legislature. And with that, I'm going to start answering questions as they've come in. One of the things that is asked is, we hope you will record and make available both the meetings and the town halls after the fact. Jess?
Yeah, definitely. I think that we should absolutely record them. And we have upped our game, and we are recording all of our webinars now, and we have a YouTube channel that we're uploading them to. So there's just a few on there now, but we'll continue to add those. And if you go to YouTube and just search like Iowa Chapter Sierra Club, I'm sure you'll be able to find our YouTube channel.
So Christy Cooper is asking us, how do you stand out on social media when the bulk of the comments have been negative? I want to remain positive, but doubt senators and the governor actually read the comments on their social media page.
Right. I think if you are like I'm going to talk Facebook first, that if you're a friend with your legislator, you can kind of write on their wall, and that's a good way to kind of get through all of the comments that might be on a post or an article or something. So try to friend them so that you have access to write something on their wall. And like you said, yeah, stay positive and make sure it's heartfelt, and that might help it stand out a little bit more. On Twitter, though, you're probably right. Like it's going to be really hard to stand out in the sea of comments that are on some of those posts. But you can send direct messages via Twitter. There's a lot of other options through that. But I would say make sure you're friends with them on Facebook. Facebook, I think, is going to be the key way, and tag them directly. And instead of commenting on something that might already be there where you could get drowned out in the comments, make your own post either on their wall or on your wall and tag them in it. So that way it's kind of a standalone thing, and that you're not just buried in a bunch of comments.
Mike Carberry said, I heard today on IPR that our governor will not pursue I will and the 1 cent sales tax. Well, thank you, Mike. That's good to hear.
Okay.
Marge Dreyer wants to know, is there a good place to track what a bill's number is? So I plan to do that in the blog. It's on the home page. You'll see the blog right on the bottom of the home page, and the bill numbers will be there. The second thing is, when we do the lunch and learn, if there is a bill number that's active, we will talk about that bill number. Also on our webpage, there's on our webpage, there is a tab for legislature, and there will be a document that has all the bills that we are tracking. And so you can go through there, search for that, and you can find bill numbers there. If you don't know what the bill number is, don't worry about it. You can just kind of talk about topics in general, because when the legislators are back in their caucus, they're not talking about bill number 1, 2, 3. They're often talking about, well, what do we do about the water quality bill that does X, Y, Z? So if you talk about that in your emails or your letters or your phone calls, the legislators will probably know what's going on. Bill numbers are nice, though.
There's one, how do I get invited to Zoom meetings led by a legislator? So if you find your legislator on the legislative website, they're probably going to link to their actual website. Most legislators have their own website, and there you can sign up for their newsletter. And if you sign up for their newsletter, you'll probably get an email maybe once a week, or maybe not quite that often, where you get a calendar of their events. So that's one way. I'm not sure if every legislator takes advantage of a weekly newsletter, so you'll have to check. But I think the best thing, especially to introduce yourself to your legislator, is give them a call now and ask them what their plan is for like legislative forums, and ask them, how will I know about it? Are you gonna put me on your email list, or just directly ask them, because they may all have it a little bit different. But I assume being on their newsletter is going to be one of the best ways.
The other thing is, in some areas, the League of Women Voters has regular calls or meetings with the legislators. And I saw in Lynn County, the League of Women Voters is going to do something via Zoom. So if you have that in your county, reach out to League of Women Voters and see what they're doing. The other thing, your local newspapers might cover those. It kind of depends. I also have posted on the web in prior years a listing of where you can find out where the forums are. Because this is kind of up in the air and we don't know exactly what the legislators are going to do. I don't know how accurate that's going to be this year, but I'm going to try to keep that up, or try to point to information that has that. So hopefully that will give you some idea on how to get started.
Pam, this one's a good one for you too. How do you see redemption centers factoring in on the bottle bill?
So the redemption centers are asking for an increase of the handling fee from 1 penny to 2 pennies. They're active. They've been active for many years on that. They will remain active this year. They obviously don't want to shut down the bottle bill because they're making money off of it. So they were kind of hoping that something would be done this year because they're struggling. So I think they're going to be on our side, and we've worked closely with them. In fact, I've worked closely with the lobbyists for the last few years in dealing with the bottle bill changes, and the lobbyist for the redemption centers. So we're still communicating. So they're on our side.
How do you know who their staffers are who are likely going to be handling input? That's another really good question. Is every legislator has at least one staff person. I think most of them just have one. But if you can't get a hold of your legislator, knowing who their staff person is another good way to get through to them. But that's going to be another thing where you're probably going to have to call or email and ask who their staffer is and what their contact information is, because I don't think that's on the website. Is it, Pam?
It is not on the website. There is a book that gets published every year. It like last year's looked like this. It's just a small book, and it does have the staff person's name. Sometimes when you call, instead of getting the desk and the phone of the legislator, when you call the Capitol, the staff person will handle it. So you may end up automatically getting to them without realizing it. If you have questions or need somebody, either Jess and I will be able to answer some of that, or we can dig on it. I don't have the current staff for this year yet.
Yeah. And if you want one of those books, they're at the Capitol for free. They usually run out of them at a certain point. So, but I don't know if you can get them anywhere else other than the Capitol, but they put out a new one of those books every year. And it always has their cell phone numbers in it.
Yes. And it usually takes about 2, 3, 4 weeks before they're available at the Capitol, but there's a run on them when they come out.
And every year they're a different color, so they're very pretty if you collect them over the years. Okay, let's go to these questions here. We have some people just saying that they've seen a member in Illinois do a Zoom call. So it must have been like a state representative do a Zoom call, and it was fun and new people attended. So, and they said they've done polls on calls and they're great. So I really think legislators are going to use that poll feature. And then Chris Jones has laid out 5 specific ways to improve Iowa's water. The first three of which he says are widely recognized as needed: ban row crops in 2-year floodplains, ban fall tillage, ban manure on snow and frozen ground, and 2 others. Is it worth proposing legislation to get these done?
Oh, that's interesting. It probably is worth it. Chris Jones is going to be talking to us on a webinar on the 4th of February. And that's a good question. And I'm going to pursue that as we talk with him about that. I think that's a good idea. Okay.
I have just a couple more in the Q&A, and then we can switch over to the chat. Bottle bill comment: rural counties don't have recycling services at landfills, so the redemption of bottles will keep rural counties clean. There's your reason number 1 in your letter to the editor, Christy. That's exactly right.
And not every community has a redemption center, but every community that has a store is supposed to take those bottles and cans back. So it's a convenience store or a grocery store or a dollar store or a Menards. They're all supposed to take those bottles back if they sell the drink. So that's really important. And now I live in an area where there's a redemption center fairly close by. And so I'm directed to go to that redemption center, but not everybody has them.
Okay, I'm switching over to, well, there's one more question in the Q&A. So there may be federal climate change support. Is there opportunity to take advantage of these?
I don't know enough about what's going to happen with the federal supports, but we'll be watching that, yes.
Another good thing about the bottle bill is that it provides a stable supply of plastic that helps us recycle other types of containers that are plastic. So that's another good. There's your reason, Debbie, on your letter to the editor. On bottle bill, another selling point is that the material recovered in redemption programs is more desirable because it is less contaminated and therefore has greater usability and value. Carrie, there's your letter to the editor.
And also use those points when you talk to your legislators. They need to hear that from constituents.
Yeah. And Margaret's asking, can you give a couple sentences on what the Action Network is? Do we tell others? I think she's asking about the action alerts. Is that, Margaret, if?
No, that's that legislative sign up that you want them to sign on. Okay. Why don't you answer that, Jess?
Yeah, so the legislative action team is going to be an email list that we're able to use for rapid response stuff. When we do like normal emails that we send out, like the one you got inviting you to this webinar, sometimes that can take a few days to actually get that all scheduled and planned. And this email list is going to allow us to do quick responses. So when we get an alert that says the subcommittee is going to be scheduled this afternoon at 3 o'clock, then we can go to this list of our legislative action team and keep people up to date right as it happens. So it's just going to be a way for rapid response and things that are going to be really important that we want to make sure people see. We're going to be using that, the legislative action team. And there'll probably be other things that we'll ask the legislative action team to do as well. But if you know you want to take action, especially knowing that it's rapid response sometimes, make sure you sign up for that.
So we have some time if anybody wants to answer another question or two. If not, we've hit the end of the road. Christy Cooper is asking us, where can I learn more about the master matrix and food supply streams that can be alternative to CAFOs?
Master matrix, we did a webinar on that I recommend absolutely. Go to our YouTube page and it's up on there. Food supply streams that can be alternative to CAFOs. That's going to be interesting as we dig into some of our soil work down the line. We're going to be talking about regenerative farming and farmers all across the state who are doing things differently. So I think once we get into that work, we'll have lots of material like live streams and webinars and eventually in-person meetings once we get out of COVID. So stay tuned for that, but there's probably a lot of other resources out there. I know if you are in the Des Moines metro area or central Iowa, even I think like the Iowa Food Co-op is a way to connect with local farmers throughout the state. And I'm sure that there are some in other areas. I just know that one because that's in my area.
Yes, and I'd like to stress that's going to be one of Jess's projects over the next few months, is to dig into some of these alternate farming mechanisms, what regenerative means and how it's applied on the ground, and just give some good examples so that we have something we can look at and point to.
Absolutely.
So Christy is asking regenerative farming research in Practical Farmers of Iowa and Rodale Institute research.
Yep.
Good resources. Yes. Thank you, Christy.
Iowa Farmers Union as well.
Organic Consumers Association has some good things.
Yeah. Okay. I think I don't see any more questions. So.
Well, thank you for attending tonight. We had some good attendance and some wonderful discussion questions. So we appreciate you joining us, and we hope that we see you helping us during the legislative session during lobbying.
Thank you so much. Have a great night. Stay safe. Stay warm.
Bye.
Bye.